Why don't we just start with, thank you, the coronavirus crisis and the role of the media has never been more important. What message do you have to a journalist, to the community leaders, policing agencies about allowing us to do our jobs? What do you think about that?
Well, I think in times of uncertainty and confusion, even chaos, as we're seeing on our streets, it's really important that we stay tethered to the first principles. And among those is the freedom of speech and the freedom of the press. The communities in which local broadcasters live. These are people, radio and TV, that live in these communities, and they represent this cornerstone value of freedom of the press. And our fellow citizens deserve and need to hear what is reported, to have context of what's happening in their communities. And when they're put under stress like this, where they're subject to danger from protesters, but even worse, I suppose, from police, some police organizations that have pepper sprayed them and tear gassed them and even fired rubber bullets at them. This is simply unacceptable because
Yeah.
we need to have this context and this information.
And kind of piggybacking off that, the mayor of the city of Detroit, who has a long history of acrimony with the media, just in the past hour came out and publicly thanked the media, actually apologized to two local newspapers here after two of their journalists were mistakenly arrested. Are you seeing other leaders acknowledging the role that we play and the importance of journalism?
Yes, we are, and we're trying to raise the profile of this issue, which I thank you for having us on to do so, because particularly public officials need to understand the vital role that broadcasters and journalists play in American society. When that goes away, or if it's endangered in any official way, and of course, it's just as wrong if it's done by those who are protesting. If we put the First Amendment in jeopardy, then we are really losing something valuable and precious. And so we salute the mayor of Detroit for recognizing this, and we ask that journalists not be pepper sprayed, tear gassed, non-lethal bullets fired at them. They need to do the job, and the American people need them to do their job.
Yes. Indeed. What about the president and his relationship with the media? I feel as if the president has made our jobs a little bit more difficult in the public's eye because of what he regularly says about the media or on Twitter, and it makes us more of a target in the field. What would you say to President Trump?
Again, I think we go back to first principles and the freedom of the press and how essential that was. I'm reminded that there's probably every president has a problem with the press. If they didn't, we wouldn't be doing our jobs because we're to hold the powerful accountable.
Mhm.
But Lincoln once observed that if you give the people the facts, everything will be okay. And so I would just simply say, whether it's President Obama or President Trump, we need to give the people the facts and let them then decide what they conclude from it. And so, what the problems that President Trump has with the media are no different than any other president. He just gives more voice to it. But I think it's important, it's vital that people in the media and broadcast journalists, especially, need to remember they have a duty to go and report the facts without fear or favor. And if we do that, we are serving the public in a way that was intended by our founders.
Indeed. Well, many will argue that having a 24-hour news cycle actually does more harm than good in situations such as these. I mean, and let's face it, cameras and live trucks many times are a magnet for trouble. How do you distinguish between the need for truth versus, us having to feed the beast, so to speak.
Well, it's a balance that we have to walk, but we need to have access to the facts and the story as it's unfolding, so that the public has the context in which to make judgments. Um, the way you correct bad information is not with less information; it's with more information. And sunlight is the best disinfectant for error. And so we just have to round off our shoulders and put our shoulder to the wheel of the First Amendment and keep doing our jobs, because then, as Lincoln assured us, everything will come out okay in the end.
Well, here in Detroit, and not just in Detroit, but across the country, local news is seeing an enormous increase in viewership and usership on our digital platforms as well, since the pandemic began, and now the protests. Is it magnifying the importance of local news once again? And what advice do you have for broadcasters?
Well, the advice I have for broadcasters is keep showing up, keep reporting the facts. Don't be afraid. You're performing a great public service, and that public service is actually more important in the age of social media, when there is so much disinformation out in the public. Survey after survey shows that the people trust most their local journalists. That's why local journalists need to be not afraid to go to work, and our government officials need to let them go to work as the first informers, and the public will then be empowered to make responsible decisions about how the powerful are doing, or the rightness or wrongness of what the protesters are protesting. So we have this indispensable sort of crossroads that we stand at, that we have to calibrate what we do in responsible ways. But the irresponsible thing is to back off and not to seek the truth and to hold the powerful accountable.
Indeed. And in the 20 years that I've been in broadcasting, I've seen how social media has played and continues to play a huge role in our jobs as broadcasters. What are your thoughts about social media and how the role that it plays in us doing our job?
Well, I think if you social media is ground zero for fake news, but that makes more important, not less important, what local journalists do. And that includes television and radio broadcasters, because that is where people go in the end, as you point out, in terms of ratings, where they go to really get the facts and to find out the truth and to have context for what is actually happening in their community. It is not on social media. It's on your local TV or radio station, with courageous journalists going into the heat of the fight to find out what's really going on and to report the truth as best they can discern it.
Since the pandemic began, a number of us have been working from home. I'm assuming that you are probably working from home as well. We probably have about 90% of the people working from home here at our television station. Do you think that we will ever go back to what we once knew as normal?
Well, I think normalcy is subject to review, and I think there's going to be lots of changes, just as there was after 9/11. Lots of things changed, and there may be more teleworking from home. I don't think we can fully predict it, but I think we can imagine a world in which a lot more is done through telecommunications, and that's fine. But there is also no substitute for being there and showing up, and for doing our jobs in the way that the public uh, needs us to do it and deserves us to do our jobs in the most integrity filled ways possible.
Yeah. What about the advertising dollars? During the pandemic, a number of businesses, all of them pretty much closed down and were not advertising the way that they once were. Do you think those advertisers will come back the way they were?
I do believe that. We have been fighting to a broader number of broadcasters to be included in the CARES Act,
Mhm.
so that we can make up some of the. I mean, it's a terrible thing. Our viewership has never been higher, and our income has never been lower. And it takes money to put on good journalism, and so we have been arguing at NAB with before the Congress, saying, in your future relief bills, make these forgivable loans forgivable if small businesses spend those dollars on advertising, because advertising on broadcasting is still the very best way to move goods and services, and that creates jobs. And so Main Street business is going to need a jump start from the government, and we're arguing that be include us so that advertising can return in a way that will keep financially healthy the broadcast journalists that are so needed in our society in times with as much confusion as this.
Indeed. Um, we've seen a number of news ownership groups lay off or furlough their employees since the pandemic. Um, Unfortunately, Graham Media has not resorted to any of those measures as of yet. Do you see that as something that is going to forever change the way that we do our jobs with fewer people? You know, I hear people talk about the old days of journalism where there was actually a person that stood behind a studio camera and moved it around, and now those studio cameras are operated by robotics, and we're doing the same job, if not more of a job, with fewer people. And it seems that, you know, since the pandemic, maybe we don't get some of those people back. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, it's just a fact that good journalism, is very needed, and it is not inexpensive. And business broadcast journalists, businesses need to be able to have advertising dollars and retransmission consent so they can hire these people back. That does not mean that technology and robotics won't continue to uh, give us greater efficiency. But one of the things that's really important to our business is that sort of that relationship with every family in the community that turns on a television set or their radio to get the facts and the news that they need and want. And so there is a point of diminishing returns where you can't keep cutting people, because at the end of the day, it takes trusted people to be able to communicate with families in the communities that we serve.
Indeed. You've been great, Gordon Smith. Is there anything else that you wanted to add that maybe I didn't ask you, or
No, I think
just any closing words?
I just think you're such a good interviewer. You've covered the waterfront very well.
Thank you. Well, we
Yeah.
certainly appreciate you taking your time to talk to us.
Well, I just want you to know Emily Barr is one of the brightest stars in broadcasting. So
We are
you have good leadership.
we are so lucky to have her, and it's really one of the reasons. She's one of the reasons that I took this job, because of her leadership and the people that she hires under her, my boss and my boss's boss. She knows what she's doing. She's sharp,
Yeah.
she's decisive, and we're better because of it. So
Well,
thank you.
you're welcome. The good Lord didn't make people any better than Emily Barr. So
That's
thank you
right.
for having
That's
me,
right.
and I hope we help move the ball
Indeed.
down the field with this conversation.
Indeed. Thank you. You have a great day.
Thank you.